morning, and aloha. My name is Tariq Sultan. Along with me, we have Omar Sultan, Tim Unton, and Tiffany Chiang, and we're representing MB Therapeutics. So what is MB Therapeutics? Well, our purpose is to establish a standard for non-invasive targeted therapeutics. So big picture, what we're trying to do is enhance the efficacy of countless drugs in the pharmaceutical industry, decrease the toxicity of these therapeutics, and accelerate the pharmaceuticals industry drug development process. We plan on doing this with our microbubble technology, or MB Tech for short, which is a revolutionary transport platform that allows for targeted delivery of drugs and genes. Our point of entry into the pharmaceutical industry will be a focus on neurodegenerative disorders such as Alzheimer's. Well, why neurodegenerative disorders? Well, over 700 million people globally are affected with neurological disorders, with the most costly form being dementia, which affects almost 36 million people globally. In fact, this number is only expected to double every 20 years, ballooning to over 81 million by 2040. The most common form of dementia is Alzheimer's disease, which affects almost 30 million people globally. In the US, it's the 6th leading cause of death, surpassing diabetes. It affects 1 out of every 8 baby boomers, and since the aging population is actually aging at an accelerated rate, a new case occurs every 70 seconds. Put another way, by the time we're done with this presentation, about 30 people will be diagnosed with Alzheimer's, which is pretty much the amount of people that are in this room right now. So what is Alzheimer's disease? Currently, it's incurable due to a lack of inadequate treatment options. It's also degenerative and eventually will lead to a loss of cognitive abilities such as memory loss and a loss of motor function. In fact, it gets so bad that during the later stages of the disease, patients can't even recognize their own family members. Now, I want you to put yourself in the shoes of a patient with Alzheimer's. You're popping 1 to 4 pills every day with a myriad of side effects due to toxicity issues, with one of the most common ones being nausea. Now, put aside everything else. Imagine that one thing alone. Imagine feeling nauseous every single day for the rest of your life due to these treatment options. Sadly, the disease will continue to progress until it eventually leads to the patient's death. So what is the available market for these drugs? Well, the market value of neurological disorders, of drugs for neurological disorders is about $95 billion, with annual treatment costs for Alzheimer's and dementia over $150 billion, which is third only to cardiovascular disease and cancer. In fact, the Alzheimer's market revenue for pharmaceutical industry is about $7 billion, and we're looking to capture roughly 3% of this market. So what is the problem? Why is it so hard to treat Alzheimer's disease and other neurological disorders? Well, it's a blood-brain barrier, which ironically is an evolved defense mechanism to keep drugs and other toxic molecules from reaching the brain. As a result of this blood-brain barrier, less than 5% of drugs can actually cross the blood-brain barrier, which obviously leads to minimal treatment for patients with neurological disorders. Currently, the only way to get these drugs passed is kind of to increase the dosage and kind of use brute force to just push it past this barrier. As a result of this increased dosage, you have drug toxicity, and because of this toxicity, obviously, there's decreased safety and decreased patient tolerability. However, at MB Therapeutics, we believe we found the solution, and I'll pass it along to Omar to talk about that.
Thanks, Tarek. So MBTI's platform technology is the solution to this problem because it simplifies the entire process by allowing molecules to get across the blood-brain barrier. Our technology allows for targeted gene and drug delivery even across the blood-brain barrier. The result is improved patient response, improved patient safety, and improved tolerability. Best of all, our technology is applicable to other organ systems and disease states. So how does it work? Well, the blue circles denote our FDA-approved microbubbles. The black dots, FDA-approved drugs or genes. We couple them together, inject it into the patient, track the microbubbles to their target destination. Once they reach that destination, we apply external energy to release the drug. As you can see in the illustration, we can vary the energy to optimize delivery method depending upon the target tissue. Any excess microbubbles are then expired through normal breathing. In these stills, you'll see the ventricle of the heart and our MB Tech. In the red circle here is the ventricle of the heart is filled with microbubbles. In the top right, these vertical lines represent the external energy source being applied. Bottom left, the microbubbles have disappeared. Drug has been delivered to that particular ventricle in the heart. And on the bottom right, the heart has refilled with microbubbles, allowing us to repeat the process if necessary. This is the actual video of those stills. So you see the heart beating, you see the external energy coming, the microbubbles have disappeared, drug has been delivered, heart refills again with microbubbles so that we can repeat the process. Here in our animal, we have gene delivery. On the left, it's without the MB Tech. On the right, with MB Tech. As you can see, we've delivered the gene specifically to the liver of this animal. The result is enhanced delivery of the gene. In terms of our competitors, on the outside are our competitors and their limitations. On the inside, our competitive superiority by comparison. Our advantages include that we can deliver drugs and genes outside of the vasculature, which means outside of the blood vessels. As I mentioned before, our technology is applicable to other organ systems and disease states. No tissue injury occurs with the MB Tech, and proof of concept has already been completed in the heart, in the liver, and is already underway in the brain. So we've already reached successful milestones for the brain. I'd like to also point out that none of our competitors' technologies can cross the blood-brain barrier. We are the only company that can successfully do so at this point. Our value proposition is therefore twofold. To patients, we offer increased drug efficacy and increased treatment options. As a result of the lower dosages that are needed, decreased toxicity, and decreased treatment costs. Overall, what we're offering is a better quality of life to the patients with severe ailments. To our target customers, the pharmaceuticals, we offer overall increased revenue, and this is as a result of the reduced R&D investments that are needed, both in terms of time and costs. And we do this two ways. First, we rescue the billions of dollars of stranded assets that these companies have poured money into but have never been able to commercialize. 50% of the time, these drugs fail because of toxicity issues, which we can directly address with the MB Tech. Secondly, we allow the possibility of extending the patents of their existing drugs. And my colleagues will talk about that more in a minute. For now, I'd like to pass it on to Tim, who will talk about our financials.
Thank you, Omar. So our firm will initially target drugs with high market potential. For example, Aricept is a commercially available drug with a wide market. Aricept's patent is expiring in 2010, but with our technology, we may be able to extend that for another 3 to 5 years. Another class of drugs we want to target are those that have been shelved for various reasons. The next drugs whose name I can't pronounce, I'll just call it BAPS for short, is one such drug. BAPS was expected to exceed Aricept in sales, but it got halted in phase 2 clinical trials due to toxicity issues. Just to give you an idea of how much these shelved phase 2 drugs are worth, Johnson & Johnson recently purchased the makers of BAPS for $700 million, and they valued the drug itself for $300 to $400 million. So our revenue strategy is twofold. We will negotiate with our pharmaceutical partners to include upfront contract revenues regardless of success, and 5% royalty revenues for every successfully marketed drug treatment. So your average life science company may require anywhere from $9 to $12 million of startup capital. However, we're not your average life science company, as we do not go through the drug development process. Instead, we require $3 million, which can be broken down into 2 phases. So for our first milestone, we need $1.5 million to complete our research and development and finalize our proof of concept to deliver drugs through the blood-brain barrier. For our next milestone, we will require another $1.5 million to commercialize our MB Tech platform. We'd like to note here that 3 years and over $700,000 has already been invested in this technology. In addition, our founders will provide some of their own capital, and we will seek grant funding from federal and private sources. So here's our pro forma income statement. We'd like to highlight here that in year 3, we'll begin to receive our first contract revenues. In year 5, we'll start to receive our first royalty revenues. Also in year 5, we will become cash flow positive and achieve our break-even point. So this is just a forecast, but we wanted to give you some indication of what our firm valuation might be at exit. So we took an enterprise value over EBITDA multiple, applied a probability of success factor, and came up with a firm valuation of $210 million. The table below shows what our investors will earn at exit, their harvest amount, their ROI, as well as their IRR. So recent trends show that large pharmaceutical companies are buying out smaller firms. Our company will likely follow the same path as our exit strategy, and we seek to be acquired by companies such as Pfizer, which has a strategy called Invest to Win, and they've literally poured billions of dollars into technologies such as ours. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Tiffany.
Thank you, Tim. Okay, so I'm going to walk you through our business strategy. Our sales strategy is to develop contractual partnerships with pharmaceutical firms, basically turning our competitors into our allies. Our business development strategy is to offer our pharmaceutical partners a method to reposition their existing drugs by coupling it with our technology to create a new patentable product which achieves equally and likely even more effective results at a lower dosage. This means lower costs and an extended patent life to realize more profit. Additionally, we can help our pharmaceutical partners rescue their stranded assets, those billions of dollars already invested in drugs that are halted at phase 2 of the FDA process due to toxicity issues. This is often the result of the high dosages that are required for a drug to be effective when it's administered without a targeted drug delivery system like MBTech. Therefore, MBTech can help these drugs progress through the FDA stages where they can become marketable drugs and some return on investment may finally be realized. So basically, we're offering pharmaceutical companies a method to raise the Titanic of their sunken assets. Our regulatory strategy is to co-develop drug and MBTech combinations to obtain a pre-investigational new drug determination, which is a prerequisite to entering the clinical phase of the FDA process. At this point, we will hand off drug development to our pharmaceutical partners who have the resources to carry it through the rest of the FDA process to market. So I want to emphasize here that MB Therapeutics will not be involved in any clinical processes. We believe this gives us significant advantages in that it lowers the financial and business risk MB Therapeutics will face. And additionally, when you take an FDA-approved drug and you combine it with an FDA-approved mechanism like microbubbles, the approval process for that combined product is expedited significantly. So what takes pharmaceutical companies an average of 10 years to accomplish, we can do in less than 4 with our approach. And what makes our whole strategy viable is that the drug delivery platform, which is MBTech, in and of itself is our intellectual property and pending a biotech and pharmaceutical patent. This protects our technology from being replicated by our competitors through the doctrine of equivalence. So if any partners or competitors want to use our technology in any of their products, they'll have to license it from us first. And again, each individual drug MBTech combination creates a new patentable product. So our management team consists of 6 individuals with diverse backgrounds. Collectively, we have over 15 years of clinical and research experience, 20 years of technological experience, and 15 years of management. Our CEO directed a multi-million-dollar federally funded genetics core lab, and our colleague, Dr. Chad Walton, is a microbubble expert and helped develop the MBTech platform process. To date, he's worked with microbubbles on a daily basis for nearly 5 years. We also have a very distinguished scientific advisory board. Each person is an expert in the diverse elements of our platform. And most notable is Dr. Ralph Shohead, who is accredited with being the originator of the microbubble itself. And he has over 10 years of experience working with that. As leaders and experts in their field, Dr. Walton and Dr. Shohead review every single microbubble publication in the nation. So our current business activities include continuing collaborations with Manoa Biosciences to use our technology to achieve gene therapy. We've also received commercial interest from international businesses, and we are currently in discussion with Neopharma, which is Dubai's largest pharmaceutical manufacturer. We're also in the process of acquiring 3 gene patents from the University of Hawaii. With that, I would like to turn the floor over to Tarek.
So just to summarize everything that we've been talking about thus far, there's future trends in the market, in the pharmaceutical market, and then there's also a myriad of needs in the pharmaceutical market and for patients. Starting with the bottom left, there is an increase in the aging population, as I mentioned earlier, and it's actually increasing at an accelerated rate. Additionally, farmers are looking to life sciences in the future. A recent report showed that by 2015, big pharmaceutical companies project that 50% of their products will have come from outside sources. As Tiffany had mentioned, there's an acceleration in the FDA process, and with their understanding that a lot of the big pharmaceuticals' greatest pains are the strict regulatory process, and they're looking forward to accelerating this process. And the future will be gene therapy, and as Tiffany had mentioned, we have a number of gene patents. The needs include enhanced efficacy and decreased toxicity, cross the blood-brain barrier, decreased costs, and increased treatment options. And as you can see, all of that leads to MB Therapeutics. So I'd like to thank you for your time and open up the field to questions.
We will now be starting our 20-minute Q&A session. Each judge will be asking one question at a time with no follow-ups, and the questions will start with Dr. Mike Cunningham.
Okay. Thank you very much. A very nice presentation. Very well done. I have a question for you, and I was doing a little research on this last night, and the microbubble technology seems to me, especially out of India, there's a lot of research that comes out of India about this type of technology. How does your technology differ from the others that are out there? And I'm looking at from journal articles from 1997 through current, and there had to be 50, 60 journal articles that specifically were about microbubble technology.
The microbubbles in and of themselves have been around for a long time. And as Tiffany mentioned, one of the originators of the microbubble itself is Dr. Ralph Strohead, who's on our advisory board. So they're contrast agents in and of itself, and they're used for imaging currently. So they're already FDA approved. What differs in our approach and other people's approaches is the application. We look to use the microbubbles as a delivery mechanism in addition to our transport platform to deliver drugs and genes site-specific. One of our largest competitive advantages is that we can successfully cross the blood-brain barrier to deliver drugs to the brain. As I mentioned, none of our competitors to date are able to do so successfully.
And you've been able to do that successfully in animals
In
right
animal
now?
models, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Jim, would like to?
Very good presentation. I almost understood it. So thank you. Who else? Are there other patents that are pending for similar processes and platforms at the current time?
One of our competitors, MRX, was trying to use microbubbles also in the brain, but they were unsuccessful in doing so. And when you apply for a patent, you have to prove that you're successful at it in order for it to be approved, so their application was thrown out. We've already achieved significant milestones, and we have a provisional patent right now on the MB Tech platform itself, so we're confident that we'll get that patent.
Thank you.
In terms of our other patents, they're full.
Our other patents that we're acquiring from the University of Hawaii right now are gene patents, and they're in the prosecution phase. They give us international exclusivity, and they have full life, which is 20 years.
And what's so significant about these gene patents that we're acquiring is, if you're familiar with gene therapy, currently gene therapy is done using a retrovirus host carrier. So they take a gene, they couple it to a retrovirus host carrier, and they insert it into the patient. The problem with the retrovirus host carrier is it's a virus. Once it gets in your system, it just keeps replicating and replicating and replicating. You have very little control over it, if at all. With our gene patents that we're acquiring, our host carrier is non-retrovirus based. So we completely eliminate that risk factor. And we've successfully introduced genes into the mouse's genome, that illustration that I showed you, it was a hemophiliac mouse. So we've introduced the factor IX protein. It's been incorporated into its genome, and it has been completely producing its own protein for 150 plus days now.
Thank you.
So you have in your presentation that you have the proof of concept completed for the heart and liver, and I'm still a little fuzzy on why you think that your microbubble technology will cross the brain barrier.
We've actually proved that it does cross the blood-brain barrier. We've established proof of concept for that as well. What we've done for the heart and liver is successfully delivered drugs and gene therapy. For the brain, that's the next step, is to complete proof of concept in terms of drug delivery to the brain. But the microbubbles themselves, we've shown that we can successfully cross the blood-brain barrier with no side effects, so no tissue damage.
So it's very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I understand you have a transportation company. I want to understand what the passengers are going to do. So how does Aricept really work? And as my understanding, it crosses the blood-brain barrier. But
Right.
maybe. I mean, so what are you doing? Or
Right.
why is this
So
additive?
Aricept is one of those 5% of drugs that can cross the blood-brain barrier. However, one of the largest problems with drugs is their toxicity issues. So currently what you do is you pop a pill and it has to go through your whole body before it can get to your brain. And so in order for it to get to your brain successfully and have enough dosage, you have to increase the dosage, which leads to toxic effects throughout the rest of your body. With our technology, we can do two things. We can lower the dosage amount, or we can do one thing. We lower the dosage amounts, which will increase the efficacy potentially and decrease the toxicity. And so what that means for the patient is that they're going to have less side effects like the nausea that I was talking about earlier or any other adverse effects. And what that means for the pharmaceutical industry is that they actually have to produce less of this drug, so it actually lowers their R&D costs.
So have you actually shown a reduction in side effects, and also this, even to some extent the same amount gets to the brain?
So that would be part of our first milestone, is to successfully show that that we can cross the blood-brain barrier with drug delivery. But we've shown that you can do that for the heart and liver. So theoretically, there's no reason why it would be any different.
Now, I know you can cross it. The question I'm asking is, so what?
So what?
Yeah.
So it allows for the targeted delivery, right? No longer are you
So
popping a pill.
smaller amount then.
Exactly. No longer is the drug being systemically distributed to your body. You're delivering it directly to its target destination.
And perhaps more importantly, it'll open up the treatment options for all these drugs that were shelved due to toxicity issues and offer a myriad of new treatments for these patients that can improve their quality of life significantly.
Yeah, go ahead.
back
Yeah,
this way?
we'll go back this way. Yeah, go ahead.
On your income statement, I noticed you didn't have any cost of goods sold. Everything was thrown into operating expenses. Is that, that seems, can you address that for me?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
On your income statement, it seems if, you're producing a product that you would need to have some cost of goods sold versus just operating
We're not
expenses.
doing any manufacturing of these drugs. We're
Right.
simply doing the
Licensing.
combining the microbubbles with the drug,
Right.
and then we're passing it off to the pharmaceutical company, and they'll be pushing it through the rest of the phases, as well as doing the distribution and manufacturing of those drugs.
Okay.
So our role is purely R&D. That's our expertise, and that's what we would like to stay focused on.
Okay.
How much time are each of you spending on this? Are you full-time on this project, or is this part-time, or you have other jobs? What's the deal there?
The three main founders are full-time on this. We do have some consulting that we do on the side, obviously, so we can continue focusing on this and be able to pay our bills at the same time.
My question's in line with that and the management team. I see that you have some experience in the different areas. If I look at, is it Omar?
Yes.
Yes. Could you tell me a little bit more about your specific experience
Sure.
in the IT and space?
Sure. So in terms of the IT space, I've built radiology imaging systems from the ground up. I've built data warehouses from the ground up, telemedicine systems, electronic medical records, hospital information systems. That's where my expertise lies, in the data warehousing capabilities and the application development, system development.
Okay. And who on your team is the chief negotiator with the big pharma companies that you need to embrace and are
Great
going to
question.
fund all of this?
Great question. That's actually the first person that we're looking to hire, is a director of business development that has deep ties to the pharmaceutical industry to get us in those avenues.
We have a number of applicants actually lined up, and they're just waiting for us to proceed forward so that we can actually start paying them a salary.
Okay, thank you.
My question follows up a little bit on what Mike asked you. Why don't you assume that I'm a potential licensee? Probably Omar or Tim, that's probably your question. And sell me on why I should license your product.
Well, you have to license our product to actually use our transport
Well,
mechanism.
but it's a licensing deal.
Yeah.
Yeah, why don't you sell me on why I should do that?
So right now you have billions of dollars of shelved assets. These shelved assets, these stranded assets, are largely due to toxicity issues. 50% of the time, as Omar had mentioned, these drugs are shelved due to toxicity. So what we're asking you to do is, you've already invested $300 to $400 million into this drug for an upfront licensing fee of what, $750,000, which is just pennies to this pharmaceutical industry. To test out one more to give this one more try so that we can lower the dosage issues and consequently lower the toxicity issues and hopefully pass through whichever phase the drug was shelved in onto the next stage.
Okay, I'll just ask you one more quick question. I'll go
Sure.
back this way. It ties into that $750,000 fee, and who knows what the fee will be. What do you think the sales cycle will be on trying to close these deals with these potential licensees?
Well, the first contract we expect to receive in year 3, but we're trying to hire that the development person, director of business development, excuse
yeah.
me, and he'll be actively pursuing with pharmaceutical companies and contacting them. So we hope to have at least 2 contracts in year 3, but that'll be at least for the first 3 years. It'll try to get to us to that point in year 3. But after that, once we establish our business and get our name out there, we think we can ramp up with contracts thereafter.
Okay. So Tim, did you say 2 contracts in 3 years? Is that what you said?
2 contracts in year 3.
In year 3.
In year,
yeah.
in
Okay.
year 4 we have 3, and year 5 we have 5, and it keeps ramping
Okay.
up.
So, thank you. Michael, you're up.
Thank you. Have you put together a list on your top 10, let's say, drugs that are shelved? Because I think it's a novel approach, saying let's go after the farmers, the shelved products. Is there a top 10 there, and are they focused on Alzheimer's, or is it all about the brain, or does it also go into the liver and to the heart? What are the products?
So we would have
the
to
drugs that are out there already.
we have to prioritize it by the reason that they were shelved. The number one reason, if it's toxicity, then that is the number one thing that we can address with our technology. Secondly, since we're the only ones that can successfully cross the blood-brain barrier, we're focusing on neurological disorders. Since Alzheimer's disease is one of the most costly forms for the pharmaceutical and healthcare industry, that would be the greatest solution to the market's greatest pain. So we would prioritize them in that sense.
So given that, what do you have these drugs listed already, and then who are your prime targets?
Okay, so right
Who
now,
owns those drugs?
maybe our top 2 choices would be a drug like Aricept, which patent is expiring. It's already FDA approved. We can establish that the combination of that drug and our microbubble will enhance the efficacy and will decrease toxicity. It's the lowest risk to enter this market since, again, they're both already FDA approved. And with that, we can prove to pharmaceutical companies that, yes, we can help you with other kinds of drugs. BAPS is another great example. Aricept is currently the market leader. BAPS was projected to overtake Aricept and reach $7 billion in sales, but it never passed phase 2 of clinical trials. So those are 2 prime examples of the kinds of drugs we would address.
Okay, thank you.
Have you been collaborating with any pharmaceutical companies?
So,
So Neopharma is actually the largest pharmaceutical company in the United Arab Emirates in Dubai, and we've already initiated discussions with them to test out some of their drugs with our platform.
and actually this past month has been very successful for us. We've started to receive interest from Novartis, and a director from Pfizer has also emailed us. And as you know, Novartis has Exelon, and Pfizer is marketing Aricept in the US.
So following on Mike's question, how many projects are you working on now? How many active projects?
Drug projects?
Yes.
So with the gene patents that we're acquiring, we've done a lot of focus on gene therapy. For example, is the hemophiliac mouse. In terms of drugs, our first step is to find and address the drugs that Tarek had just mentioned. But then also we'd like to test it out with some generic drugs, right? It's low cost, it's low risk. We can just take some generic drugs, combine it with our platform, and see if it really truly provides the efficacy and the lower dosage that we are expecting and anticipating. So all of our testing to date, though, has been on the animal models, as I mentioned previously. So we haven't actually combined with any drugs currently in the market at the moment. But that would be the next step.
So that is the focus of our first 2 years of R&D, is to take these generic drugs, which are inherently a lot cheaper, and to prove efficacy in the animal models. Additionally, during this time, we're not closing any doors to any further pharmaceutical needs, whether it be a treatment for the heart, treatment for diabetes. The beauty behind our technology is that it's so robust that it's virtually applicable to any organ or disease state. So pharmaceutical industry that is looking into cancer treatments or diabetes research can easily come to us we're continuing to be in communication with them to enhance their current treatment options.
So just, do you have a concrete list of the 5 top things you want to do? I think Mike asked that.
The top things that we want to do? The
Top 5 drugs or genes that you want to deliver.
Top 5 drugs or genes, or top 5 things
Whatever.
that we anticipate doing in our first milestone. So the first thing that we're going to do with the $1.5 million is establish our lab space, acquire a core scientific team to carry these drugs through, and to finalize the proof of concept for the brain, as we mentioned before. The fourth thing would be, what are the fourth and fifth? To ensure that we can, as I mentioned, increase the efficacy rate and lower the dosage. And the fifth thing would be to, actually, if I can skip back. The first thing would be to hire the director of business development to exactly identify the pharmaceutical companies that we can start talking to immediately, and then everything else would shift down on.
One other question, the microbubble technology, which is now used for diagnostic reasons, right? Is that what,
As a contrast agent, yes.
have those been used in the brain directly?
Yes. A bunch of companies have tried to do that. Imurex was one that Tiffany mentioned. They failed because they were causing tissue image because they were using very, very high source of energy. As I mentioned, we have a couple of different methods to apply the energy, and our MB Tech does not have any tissue damage that occurs because we can change the frequency that we're hitting that we're utilizing basically.
The frequency and the composition of our microbubbles.
These are the same frequencies that they use on pregnant women to image the fetus, so it's quite safe.
But what you're doing is you've got the bubble filled with stuff, right?
Yes.
And then you put the machine on, it blows up the bubble.
It triggers the release of the drug. It doesn't actually blow up the bubble.
There's multiple ways of doing it.
Okay.
That was way too graphic.
That's actually the problem Imurex was having. So.
But you're hypothesizing that's not going to be a problem.
Correct.
In the brain.
Right, we don't use the same method that MRX uses, and we actually realized that could cause a problem in MRX, and it did.
But it was because of the energy. It was because of the energy used, not the
No,
microbubble.
it was a combination of the
was.
bubble and the energy.
Okay, I'd like to thank the judges for their questions, and I'd like to thank NB Therapeutics for an excellent presentation.